Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and as we have been doing through September, every Thursday we are covering performing arts organizations, issues, and leaders. And today we will be discussing the future of performing arts organizations with special guests, Lori Dimun, President and CEO of the Harris Theater in Millenium Park, Chicago; Rachel Fine, Executive Director and CEO of the Wallis Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts in Los Angeles, California; and Elizabeth Sobol, President and CEO of the Saratoga Performing Arts Center in Saratoga Springs, New York. We're so pleased to have you all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go over to you, Lori, but let me set this up by saying that your performing arts organizations all gather people together to enjoy music, dance, theater, other performances. And my goodness, what a challenging environment this has been. We haven't been able to gather together during the pandemic. So let's talk a little bit about what you've experienced and how, Lori, you are coming out of this pandemic and what kind of changes it's actually wrought. And then we're going to go around the table and then we're going to deal with some other issues. Lori?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Well, it's been a ride. It's been an adventure. I think that's probably the easiest way to put it. And I sit here today now having navigated a year of what would be actual live in-person performance again. And I think I sit here obviously feeling very optimistic, and Chicago is a community that celebrates arts and culture, and we're seeing people come back, maybe not where they were pre-pandemic, but we're really starting to see audiences come back. The artists here in Chicago have brought forth this past year the most incredible programming. We've been able to welcome back 17 of our 28 resident companies at the Harris this past year, and are already seeing 25 of those 28 coming back this next year. And so we're starting to really see companies get their feet underneath them and really feeling a little bit more security and stability as we venture into this next season. But there's still a lot of hurdles ahead of us. I think our team, while we went through plans A, B, C, D, E, F, and G last year, I think we're really hoping that we can manage those hurdles maybe with A, B, C, and D plans now that we've been through so much this past year. But we're feeling really optimistic going into this coming season ahead.
And as we travel around the country, Rachel, we're finding that the audiences that are returning are not all returning at the same time. So we're finding that the younger audiences are returning first. The older audiences are coming back with a little bit more hesitancy. So the audience mix has actually adjusted. Are you finding that that's the case over in Los Angeles, or are you finding that your audiences are returning at pretty much the same rate for every audience cohort, whether it's age or defined by other attributes?
No, the audiences are definitely not returning in the way that they were pre-pandemic. So March of 2020, I think we're seeing very, very different patterns among all different constituents. And I think there are a lot of factors, from how confident do you feel in an indoor space to, are you willing to wear a mask? We are still mandating masks and vaccinations in our venue. And there are a lot of people who think, understandably, who are very tired of wearing masks. So I think it's many, many different factors, from the programming that we're putting on stage and what is actually going to draw people out because they're not coming out with the same frequency, to how comfortable do they feel in the space. So no, we're seeing very, very different patterns. And I think at this point, we just need to have a good sense of humor. You know, we spent lots of time and effort and money and investment on marketing data, mining marketing data, and it's just all gone out the window. 5 years of working very hard to better understand our audiences. And we've just had to put that aside and, now look at, we're spending a lot of time with the Audience Outlook Monitor. I'm sure you're all following that as well. But it's changing every single month. And so, we're just like everyone else in terms of what we're seeing. But I don't know that it's as age specific. We definitely have older audiences who are coming out. And again, it really depends. We have a Motown show that is opening our season on October 1st. It is completely sold out, and it's definitely an older demographic, completely sold out in a matter of days.
That's really interesting. And Elizabeth, in Saratoga Springs, you have a completely different environment than a major urban centralized environment. People are coming from around the region and to the region. Do gas prices also affect what you're experiencing? I mean, you have the mask fatigue. I'm sure it's true for every part of the country. How are you faring, and what are your audiences like, and how are these various factors affecting you?
Yeah, it's like the same, that there are these wide fluctuations, not necessarily based on discernible trends. So just to give you kind of a quick overview, like we are in upstate New York, so we're not in an urban center. It's a city of about 30,000 and a region, the capital region of upstate New York, of between 500,000 and 1 million, depending on what you're counting. We, for the most part, have been masks off. Even last year, the governor released all restrictions going into the main part of our season. So we were masks optional for the audience. The backstage still continues to be masked. But our main residencies are Jazz Fest at the end of June, a week of New York City Ballet in July, and then 3 weeks of Philadelphia Orchestra in August, and then a whole series of Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center across the 6 different performances across the summer. All of it outdoors. We moved the chamber music outdoors, and sort of Jazz Fest, we were seriously down. We only hit 70% of target. That is a very mixed audience. It's the most diverse audience we have. 50% out of towners, as opposed to orchestra and ballet being about 85% local. So we definitely think gas prices fit into that scenario. We're a big destination location for weddings and events and everything. Hotel prices skyrocketed this year. Saratoga is also the home to the Saratoga race course, which is the oldest thoroughbred horse racing in the country. And so for those 7 weeks, hotel prices are just through the roof. So we think that affected attendance some. Ballet, we were pretty much flat year over year from 19. And then the orchestra went gangbusters, 114% of target.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting. So orchestra, classical music, I guess?
Yeah.
Right?
So I think there's a couple of things. And before I forget, I do want to mention that we're also a Live Nation house. So we had 33 Live Nation shows. Believe it or not, those tend to be older demographics. Like you've got 80-year-old, I had a 100-year-old woman coming to Rod Stewart's, like literally, and those shows were packed. We had capacity audiences for particularly the country shows because of, our location and everything. People did not seem worried about being with 18 to 25,000 of their nearest and dearest friends. So with orchestra,
the once in a lifetime experience seems to be, if you're 100 years old and Rod Stewart's playing, that might be the last time you get to see him. And I think we are seeing that too, someone who might not perform frequently in Los Angeles or is a megastar, people of all ages, stripes are coming out.
Yeah.
How do you forecast, given because you just said a couple of things that to me were really surprising. So the classical music piece, 114% oversubscribed, where other performances are undersubscribed. Ballet.
And we were the opposite.
You're the opposite.
We were the exact opposite.
Talk about that, Lori.
Yeah, when you said that, that was really striking to me because, I do think based on our location, there's a large saturation of classical music. Right. Our most successful programs this past year were a lot of new works, new music, new composition. Even on our jazz series, we had a couple of really great rising stars, and those were our fastest selling and highest selling engagements. Whereas some of our more classical music ones that we actually were kind of anchoring those in our season were much more difficult to sell. So it was interesting that was almost exactly opposite to what your audience was experiencing.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I may, like just to sort of highlight, because the orchestra season was very different than any orchestra season we've ever had. It was a really diverse season. And we did try some cross promotion of having artists, like for instance, Lettucey was on one of the closers on our Sunday Jazz Fest. she also was doing the music of Nina Simone with the Philadelphia Orchestra. So when we announced the orchestra show the day she performed, we had a ton of people buy tickets for that Philadelphia Orchestra show. But it was an incredibly diverse, BIPOC artists, women, composers, choreographers. I'll give you one example too. Our opening night normally is something along the lines of a festive fireworks or Tchaikovsky spectacular sort of usual opening night with fireworks. And this year, particularly as we were planning, the war in Ukraine was breaking out. We did not want to do the 1812 overture, much less have cannons and reenactors and everything. So we ditched that and put in its place a new work choreographed by Tyler Peck on Ballet X, who were based in Philadelphia, and with music by Valerie Coleman, Emoja, the Anthem for Unity. And so we just completely switched up using our traditions, but with different content. And people really responded to it. Like, we've been, not sure how much new material, new artists, young up and comers to bring to the table, thinking that they kind of wanted that steady diet of Yo-Yo Ma and Joshua Bell.
Well, young audiences want, right? I mean, Rachel, don't young audiences want the new? Don't they demand it? One of the things that I've been looking at, I've been having discussions with jazz and blues presenting organizations all over the country, and if you just take a look at the artists, they are young, they are diverse, they are. The music that is presented is just all over the place, and it's fabulous. And basically, the traditional side is not. If there's too much of it, you won't attract those young audiences. Rachel, what are you finding in terms of your audience taste? Are you finding demand for the new, or are you defining more comfort with the traditional?
I mean, again, I don't think it can be sort of isolated into new or traditional. I think there's so many factors at play, including who the artist is. So that's a major, major draw, or not. I think, I'm trying to think what else, but there's so many different factors. We have so much content too in Los Angeles. So, what's the competition and who's playing what and where and when? Is it indoor? Is it outdoor? So I'm not sure, for me, it's new versus traditional. I think there are just so many factors at play, and, we're making it up as we go along. As we see patterns, we're trying to do, new things and attract people with a variety of different measures. I think for younger audiences, though, and I know, we've heard this many, many, many times about the immersive experience, but I think that is really true, that a lot of the younger audiences are not interested in coming in and seeing things in a traditional format, first half intermission, second half, sitting in your seat the whole time, no drink, and I think where we've really seen a lot of younger audiences is when it's more than just that, when it's more than just what I just described. So for some of our artists, we have, not during COVID, but before COVID, we were seeing huge response to having drinks in the theater, which of course, for someone of my age and generation, that was just totally taboo. So now, along with Broadway, drinks at your seat. I mean, it's just expected.
Are you finding that you have to deal with physical space changes and changes to the traditional theater experience that basically change what's going on, not on stage, but what is going on in terms of how you treat, how you greet, how you interact with your audiences? I see, Elizabeth, you're nodding, but this whole idea of sitting in a small seat for an hour with your legs sort of pulled up against you and sort of in that small confined space. The young audience is just intolerant of that kind of thing anymore. Elizabeth, how do you deal with the fact that you have a built environment, that those seats are actually fixed and installed? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think it's something even, we can't change the actual seating, obviously, but one of the things that we found ourselves doing for the first time ever, particularly during the orchestra, is instructing our ushers on their guidelines in a different way. So for instance, where we knew we were trying to bring in a new audience, whether it was Lettucey, bringing in the jazz audience and a more diverse audience, or our film nights where we're bringing in kids from all over the capital region, you cannot impose the same kind of strict classical music etiquette on audiences if you want to grow a new audience for the future. And I'll never forget my first festival managers meeting after I had, left the, talent agency and record company world and moved to my first, foray here in Saratoga, running a not-for-profit, and sat down with my colleagues, and we were talking about churn, ticket sales, and growing the audience. And I said, what do you guys consider the biggest challenge to bringing in new audience? And they all said the glare factor. And I said, what in the world is the glare factor? And they said that when those new audiences come in and they do not exhibit accepted etiquettes, people turn around and glare at them and they will never come back. And I think that's something we all have to be very, very cognizant of every night, because we all know that coming to particularly a classical concert, but even when just the Philadelphia Orchestra with a pop or rock artist or a film night, these are like reading hieroglyphs. Reading a program for an orchestra program is like reading hieroglyphs. And we all have to remember that we've luckily grown up with a kind of inherited or learned or educated, behavior on how to do this. But like most of the world don't anymore, because they're not going to those concerts as part of their normal experience.
So, Lori, are you competing in a certain respect with the Chicago White Sox? Are you competing for that audience? I'm really serious. In other words, if you take Elizabeth's point about the glare factor, right? You're not wearing the proper thing. You're not dealing with accepted etiquette. But a huge portion of your audience, while they're interested in the arts experience, they completely don't care about those traditional points of etiquette that Elizabeth was talking about. Are you competing for those butts and seats?
Maybe not White Sox. No, absolutely. We absolutely are, especially as we looked at, and Rachel, you kind of alluded to this too, about this intergenerational audience or a mixed generation audience. I do think a lot of the programming that we are doing is geared towards, bringing the whole family and make it experience, and really trying to draw in audiences that are, again, cross generations. I do find one thing that has been really interesting for us, and again, with some of these programs that are really highly successful, and I'd love to say it's all our marketing, but social media has played a huge role when we're programming artists that they themselves have huge followings. We're seeing a lot of their pushing out to their fans the excitement around coming to Chicago, what that experience is going to be. And I think we've been able to work with artists to kind of curate the purchase path, but also what the experience is going to be when they walk in the door. Because even if we have an artist behind, backstage that's sending pictures that make it feel like they're comfortable or they're at home at the Harris, then your audience is going to feel that kind of same energy. And we've seen some really great, kind of cross marketing efforts between the artists and then us. And then what it's also helped us to do is think about what is it like when audience walk through our front doors. And we've had more and more artists, and I'm interested if you've had this as well, that are interested in, do you have a playlist? What music is playing when your audience comes in? What are you serving at the bar? What are the concessions? Because some of this, especially younger generation artists,
what am I going to experience before I actually get there?
They want to know, we had Samara Joy, who's this young, amazing jazz vocalist. And she was so curious about who was going to come to her performance and what that experience is going to be. And she asked such great questions that, led our team to also ensure that her audience was going to feel welcome.
And oh my God, I would go in when we were doing searches and I would say, use social media, let the artists open up what was going on in their lives, right? Have them bring their audience. And I was greeted with real rejection, but things are changing now, right? Because because centers like yours, Rachel, they need that kind of collaboration that Lori just described, right?
Oh, absolutely. I also think it's not just before, it's after. So instead of making people wait outside of the green room, so many of our artists just come out and have drinks at the bar afterwards. And that is an extension of the performance and the experience in the community building. And we love that if the artist, whether it's a string quartet or a rock band, that they're going to come out and mingle with everyone and that they're approachable. But just going back to Lettucey, because we did the same show, we did the Nina Simone show, and not everybody has a black box theater, but instead of having a traditional seating arrangement, which we can do in our black box, we set it up as a nightclub. And I think so many of those, like the expected etiquette just went out the window, or traditional etiquette, I should say. There was definitely etiquette, but it just made for a very, very, whether it was the lighting, the seating, the drinks, the audience interaction. And I think the invitation by the singer, by Lettucey, to, stand up, be a part of this with me, that energy. So again, I realize not everybody can just change the format, of their seating or their space, but we've also put a lot of audience members on our stage, which is, it's nothing new, but I think when you pay a premium price to be on stage with the artists, it's really magical. And talk about immersive, you're in the center of it all.
And then your people have to start reconfiguring their own thought processes, their own workflows, their interactions with the audience. So the relationship between the administrative side of your operations and the art side, those barriers start to also dissolve, don't they? In terms of, Elizabeth, how you're, and Lori, in terms of how you're interacting on the administrative side, traditionally you had people's in offices and people who were in rehearsal rooms and on the stage and all over the place, right? Preparing to present their art, but the actual workspace was the actual stage. Now, you actually have to interact in a different way, and also your education piece is going to be different. How do you see that shifting, and how are you preparing for a continued embrace of these new ways of operating in buildings that were built, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago? How do you deal with that?
Well, those were a couple of questions and big ones. To go back to the audience, for one thing, we've really tried to flatten our staffing so that really everybody was involved in almost everything going into the new season. So it was important because we have such a
So you function more like a neural network where everybody's communicating with each other as opposed to a hierarchy, right?
Yeah, we just, that kind of hierarchy does not work. And we're a very, very small staff for what we pull off during the summer. And so it was really important that we 24 people year-round staff, right? And then of course we have about 450 seasonal employees for the summer. But it was really important because of those 24 people at any given time on any given show night, most of those people are going to be interacting with ticket buyers, donors, artists, all of the above or whatever. And so this started during COVID where, everybody was craving for this is where we're going, or this is right and this is wrong. Like everybody was craving certainty and black and white and all that kind of stuff. And so we worked really hard to cultivate we don't know what tomorrow will bring, and we're just going to wake up and hopefully use beginner's mind to deal with what comes our way. And I think that during COVID, we all individually and as a staff learned some really important skills to just keep, approaching every day as this kaleidoscope that's never the same.
It's a very good point, right? If you're going to be working under pressure, try and make it as fun and as interesting as possible because people are going through a lot. Lori, you got a different situation in that you're not doing this kind of jack of all trades approach, right? You've got an infrastructure that is also a little bit more developed, and you are in a major urban area. Have you discovered a flattening approach or a neural network approach that works for you in this time, or have you taken a different route?
No, very similar. But one thing that I have found that's one of our biggest challenges right now is that During the pandemic, while it was grueling, there was a ton of innovating happening. And, we spent a lot of time with our team that we were able to retain, thinking out of the box and really kind of just digging into who we can be, how is our mission serving in this time? And it was a lot of innovative thinking, and then, turned into action and a lot of virtual programming, all of that.
Were the artists driving some of that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We did some really incredible projects, and it was coming from Chicago artists. We actually did a project with the Wallis, a huge films project that was really engaging, and we all learned a ton from, and it was pushing us. We were really spending this time being creative. And then as we rounded into planning for the reopening, we had to go right back into operating mode, and we had to go back into getting all of our logistics in row and how do we welcome people back. And I think right now, one of the things that we're really wrestling with is, building the capacity of team to be able to spend time almost like a research into, R&D and really innovating and being creative, while also taking the team that was responsible for running the operations and the day-to-day and logistics. And so, we have as a team have tried to carve out time. Like, this is a meeting where we're only talking about ideas, and we're not going to, just dive into logistics. But I do think as we look to the future, to be able to maintain that type of exciting innovation, we're going to have to think about building out our teams and talent in a different way, in a different capacity, and probably larger than, Elizabeth, you mentioned small team. We have 30 full-time staff, 200 plus part-time. Is like, do we actually really need to think about expanding to really step into the realm of innovation for the future? And it's something I'm wrestling with a lot right now.
In a sense, your portfolio of activity, Rachel, has expanded, and your staff has to now consider what the lessons learned have provided in terms of a shift in how you operate. But you also have to be ready to operate in a very traditionalist path. Has this experience that you've had over the last period of time, has this broaden the range of different approaches that you take to engaging audiences and working with artists? Or is this simply a blip in which your operating perspective hasn't really changed that much? You're just continuing on with a great deal of continuity.
Definitely not a blip. I think that our field and industry are forever changed. And like Lori, I'm just trying to figure it out. We're still stuck on remote. Who gets to work remotely? When your production team has to be in all the time, every day, and your development team doesn't, how, that those issues of parity. And, we're a business that, in my opinion, relies so much on being in person and that teamwork. But, the first question out of every candidate's mouth who is interviewing for a job, whether they are an associate or a senior director, is, what is your work at home policy? So I don't, like I said, I'm still trying to figure it out. We're trying to find the right balance and the right parity, but no, it's not a blip. I don't think we're going back.
I think in that area, because we do so much recruiting across all these different sectors, including your sectors, I think the big issue is finding people who care and are excited so much about the mission that they do what is rational. And then you give them, as leaders, you give them the ability to do what actually serves the purpose. And if it's remote, it's remote. If it's in person, it's in person. If it's a mix, it's a mix. And you giving your people the power to create the great performances on stage and the great experiences for audiences is just such a gift. It's a gift to us all. Lori Dimun, President and CEO of the Harris Theater in Millennium Park, Chicago. Rachel Fine, Executive Director and CEO of the Wallis Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts in Los Angeles. And Elizabeth Sobol, President and CEO of the Saratoga Performing Arts Center in Saratoga Springs, New York. Thank you so much. This has been just a fantastic discussion. I know that it's just touching the fringes. It's the little part of the iceberg that peaks above the surface. Please thank your boards, thank your staffs, thank your artists, thank your audiences, thank your funders for the great work that you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us all.